Okay, so first we're going to talk about what type of learning strategies that you would recommend for adult learners with English as a second language.
Okay, one of the things I've done, and that's partly because I didn't see students for a long period of a time, was I tried to focus on what they need. So individually, if I'm lucky enough to meet them individually, I can find out what the gaps are, what their interests are, what they'd like to learn more about. In groups, I would sometimes target an area that I thought you would have a lot of textbook learning because you're an engineer or a nurse or what have you, but no one would have taught you the word for windshield wiper. And you might actually need the word for windshield wiper. So I remember doing a lesson on parts of the car because I can remember learning parts of the car in French. And if your daily life requires all kinds of knowledge of things like windshield wipers and brakes and that kind of thing that people don't think of. And when you learn from a textbook and you live in a classroom, you don't have the broader reach. So I try to get at the lives of people a little bit. And for adults, it's often key because they need to go to a government office to get a passport, or they need to get some kind of certification for something, or they need, you're just going grocery shopping and you know what the food looks like, but you don't know what it's called. And that's amazing to me how much you could teach just on food. I'd get one of those posters with different kinds of food and point out things and we talk about the words for them because they were used to just grabbing it and going. And most of the time that'll work, but sometimes you need a specific word for something. And often, I suppose, where healthcare issues are concerned, it's even more complex because you wouldn't know necessarily what to call your particular ailment or disorder or something your child was suffering from or what have you, what kind of language to use around it. So I think a lot of the focus was building vocabulary according to people's interests and according to people's needs. Mm-hmm. And while it's outside of the classroom, I think you need to take into account that if you learn from a textbook, you've only got this kind of formal academic language and it's pretty streamed to your own discipline, and you really don't have a lot of language outside of it. And if people are asking you to apply something to life in some respects, you don't have the vocabulary to do that at all. You can spit back the words you learned in your textbook, but you might not have many other words. So some of it was just trying to build some English into their life. So thank God for captions and things like that on televisions. And because you tell them to turn the captions on and watch things, or get magazines in English related to their interests, or get catalogs and look at specific words for things that they're interested in buying or knowing more about. The internet is a good source, and there's lots of good internet sites that will give you exercises on how to use certain idiomatic things. For children and for adults, one of the things you do in an ESL often is a kind of role play, where you give somebody a little script. So, you say, okay, you're the doctor, and you're going to the doctor, and you're going because you have this, and then we're going to have a little conversation and see what happens. And so it's fun to, at least so you get around people's inhibitions a little bit, because everybody laughs, the whole thing is amusing too, but you get them in this situation where they try to explain what was wrong and what kind of help they needed, and they get some kind of response back from the person who was playing the doctor, and you watch the whole scene and suggest other ways they might say something.
That's great.
And you need to actually simulate some circumstances. So a lot of ESL is done in that kind of cheery, socialized, role-playing kind of way, where you set up a scenario and have people, you often give them a little bit of a script. And if they really need a lot, you might give them quite a dense script, so they know how to ask the question, and somebody else would know how to answer it, and then you take the script away and see how they're doing.
So could you relate that to the classroom? If they came with a specific issue about words that are being used in their course that aren't unfamiliar familiar to them? Is it the same kind of approach you would do?
Well, I usually suggest that they keep a notebook of things that they wonder at, words they wonder at, find someone to ask. Often universities we have a speakeasy program. It's not very much touted, but it exists. I ran it for a while. It's volunteers who are native speakers who are paired up with people who are second language, or you shouldn't even call it second language, English language learners. They're paired up with English language learners, and they converse, they meet once a week and they talk about anything. And we try to pair them up so that they're suitable to one another. It's been called McMaster's dating service because people fill out an application and say whether they want, male or female, and what area they'd like the person to be in and so forth. And then they can just meet to talk. And it's actually a pretty good system because then you've got people who are dedicated to the purpose of just meeting to chat and to answer questions that would have occurred in the week. And I tell people to keep a log of the things they wonder at and the things they have questions about, which often aren't specifically academic. Because you need often a pretty thick vocabulary to do academic stuff. You need to be able to talk about a lot more than just the facts you had to memorize for a test. So that's part of the thing. And part of it is there's almost an etiquette to it, the expectation of what do you say when you enter the room and what do you say when you leave, and what do people say and how do they typically say it. I had a student from Hong Kong who said, when he learned English, the way you said thank you was not at all very British. And he said, here they all say no problem. So all kinds of things surprise you colloquially, and you learn to imitate those things. I suggest too that people try to imitate, so they use new words. They try to imitate the things they hear. They ask questions about it, they keep track of it. And they read for interest, if they can possibly fit it in. So get magazines related to things you're interested in. Watch television shows with captions so that you can get that kind of exposure. Try to make friends who are English speakers, native speakers. I said that once to a group of Chinese students I had who were in an ESL class. They were all electrical engineers. And I said, try and find native speakers to talk to. And they said, everyone, it's a graduate class, everyone in our class is Chinese. And the prof is Chinese. So where are we going to find native speakers?
There's no world outside.
Yeah, so it's a very enclosed little group, and often that is the case. And of course, you're married to somebody who speaks your own language very often, so you don't have the exposure. I had students who'd gone on exchange, friends of mine, who said, the best way to learn language was to fall in love with somebody in the target language. That worked. It motivates you. But yeah, you need social events. And so that sort of thing, you need to encourage people to be extroverted even if they don't feel like it, so that they get opportunities to try their English. The good thing about a class is you try to create a safe environment for people to try things out.
I love that. Those are great recommendations.
So that's mostly how, because a lot of the online stuff winds up being secluded, but you need opportunities to interact with groups and try things out.
That's great. Thank you.